So, hi friends. So, I'm thrilled to meet you after some time for a brief analysis of what is happening today around the world. Welcome to Naren System Talk. So, today we are going to start by analyzing what is happening around the world with leaders here, the so called leaders, where they are taking us, how this new year has already transpired into an eventful one. Even a full eventful one, in a sense, it does not mean to be a good or bad, but it has some more activities which are leading to a suspicion of a bigger conflict. Say, for example, you had this first week of Jan, uh, Nicolas Maduro being taken out by Delta Force of United States in a covert CIA operation along with military, and Maduro was charged of being a narco terrorist. He was wanted even during the previous administration in US by 2020. There was a bounty on his head. So, having said so, these are all one of the reasons given, or it is a excuse given for in the name of making or taking more oil, extracting more oil wealth of that nation. Venezuela, which has the largest known oil reserves, is been in the excuse of narco terrorism, which actually many other countries are sponsoring in US. So, in excuse of that, he's been taken into custody and he's produced in New York South District Court on the charges which are pressed. The charges are pressed that he is doing narco terrorism and he is a dictator. So same cliched word of bringing democracy or although Trump himself did not say that is the reason, but generally USA whenever in 2003 when US had invaded Iraq in the name of democracy, they had ousted Saddam Hussein. But the real reason was Saddam Hussein had the Iraq is having oil reserves, so he was about to trade in euros, uh, ditching the dollar. So petrodollar system is a big thing. So what happens, leaving aside all this petrodollar one and other aspects to this, what happened to the common man when the leaders of the world, of a big country, you can look at it in many other angle. Big nations such as US, China, Russia can upend the global order. The global order was set in 1945 post World War II. So there is a UN charter which was hardly followed, and UN has been uh, just a viewer. It has not done anything very substantial in recent years or recent decades. So may I put you, that has created in global uncertainty, no checks and balances in a bigger country bullying a smaller country. Take for example Ukrainian invasion. There was some reason. Any reason is given by the big bully for a smaller country, which the other country necessarily will not have nuclear weapons or any credible deterrence or defense against this major power. Similarly, Venezuela found out that US was overwhelmingly powerful as it is. It has a defense budget of around 990 billion, where now it is said to have been considering to be increased to 1.5 trillion, which is a wartime effort of spending. So, what happens when the leaders, leave alone authoritarian like Saddam Hussein or Nicolas Maduro, the so-called democracies, big democracies, that the US has never followed any international rules, and they say what I said is the rule. That is what Trump bluntly put it when New York Times article when the New York Times asks him, "Do you have any power limit? Do you have anything?" He says it is in my mind, and whatever rules, international rules, which is not in favor of United States, will not pursue that. This means what might is right, and the people have to suffer. In United States itself, top 1% own 30 or around 40% of the total household wealth, which is income inequality. In India, a country like India, you have similar plight of 40%. Global average is very appalling. That is 70% of wealth is owned by top 3 or 2%. So these are all the statistics which you can more further verify with every other credible UN or any other agencies, where bottom people and middle class everywhere in any country, any given country, are paying the um, what do you call the hefty penalties for the mistakes their leaders who are doing in various way and capacity, be it a superpower or a middle power, regional power, all are paying. And so-called democracies, particularly United States, if you see, doesn't have. If you suppose you have a full majority, if a party wins a full majority, then the opposition becomes as weak as the authoritarian regime. There is no check and balance. So you have a conservative court. There you have a conservative court which has a appointee clause of president, where Senate does a confirmation. The judge is whether conservative as per president's preference. There is no check and balance. Oversight committees are there, but they are only in the namesake. And the recent example where Venezuela was attacked, it was attacked under the pretension of covert operation, not under the war. If it is a war, you need to take approval from the Congress, which is the Parliament of United States, which is like Parliament of United States. It is similar in every other big democracy and other democracies where absolute power corrupts. And absolute power is equal in if you have a populist strongman, you are as good as a autocracy where you don't have proper checks and balances. You have opposition in India, which is neither effective nor very vocal or very pointed to any issues. All the institutions are not acting in a very strong manner because there is absolute majority. That is the nature of, that has become the nature of democracy. In an absolute power democracy, there is no checks and balances unless there is a midterm where the populists lose. Now the current order is wave is populist president strongmen, whether he is right wing or left wing, they are ruling the world. More so right wing protectionist policies have come around the world due to the great power competition of various powers like US, China, India, Brazil. All these countries want to protect their own nationalities from globalization, kind of globalization which we saw post the collapse of Soviet Union. The Soviet Union itself collapsed when Mikhail Gorbachev, then secretary, then president, after president of Soviet Union, brought in was wanted to bring in the economic liberty and social and freedom, press freedom. So he brought to, after the sagging economy post Afghanistan war, he decided to bring in the glasnost and perestroika as a reform, but it didn't work out, and there was many other uprising, and there was black backlash in various levels, and there was a queue for breadline queue, and inflation was through the roof, and finally, after economic and social pressure, Soviet Union collapsed, the satellite state went away. United States remained unchallenged from 1991. But 1991 also brought in globalization, where countries like global south like China, India, and Brazil are all these so-called unquote quote unquote third world countries liberalized due to various pressure points, and you had a prosperity where middle class rose. But what happened is the Western countries and the rich countries, so-called, particularly United States, had the wealth transfer, one of the biggest wealth transfer from Western to the middle and poor countries to middle income countries, particularly in Asia. So you had 1997 Asian tigers like South Korea, Taiwan, all these countries rose. Then you had eventual rising of China, a manufacturing as a manufacturing power hub, and now technological powerhouse. Then you had eventually India rising, and all these countries also began to industrialize. So post that, the job in US became more protectionist kind of a thing. So when there was an outsourcing coupled with unchecked immigration, United States and other countries began to look inward. So they thought of reforming. The people like Trump, who who came through the plank of nationalism, which has turned out to be a hypernationalism, is based, which is MAGA, as they call it, has put in place this man, albeit through corrupt public financing of elections. Like one of the senators in United States, Bernie Sanders, said it's a oligarchy, just like what Putin does with oil oligarchy. Here it is a tech oligarchy. So these are the facts. But the people from COVID time also, when there was a COVID, it's a middle class and poorer class who have suffered, while rich have enriched themselves. And nations and government of bigger nations have bullied the smaller nations. And I don't know where this is going to end, probably in a bigger conflicts. I don't want to predict anything which is very early and look stupid in front of you, but I am seeing already conflicts brewing which are of a very perilous nature. Hope we get enlightened, not hardline leaders. We get a leader who have a balance of mind, who has a well understood mindset of people, who care for people, who care for everything, but also keeps in mind of his own country's interest, but not go into the confrontational mode which these people are going. They are doing extreme. They are mercurial leaders. They don't have brains. They have only emotions, and they go by pure emotion, ego, narcissistic tendencies. So these are the characteristics you saw in 1930s where Hitler, Mussolini all ruled. So if you want to make the same mistake, then you can choose such leaders across the world. People are okay, then we are going to dumps. Hope we can get some better leadership around the world. I have said this in my previous one of the previous videos also, how the world leaders are leading us to the damage. So this is my brief analysis. I hope we can meet in next episode, which is detailed on our spiritual trend with some good interviews. Hoping for that. Until then,